How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we're going to do a video breakdown of an assault that happened on one of our heroes by the name of Matt Tidman. He was assaulted by an inmate with a metal weight bar. The video is very uncomfortable to watch. So again, guys, if you're feel a little weary when it comes to watching these types of videos, please, guys, turn off the video now. If you're a young child, turn it off because it is a brutal assault on one of our heroes. The reason why we got to do a breakdown, one, is let the public know the dangers of the work that we do, definitely. But also maybe there's something that we can learn here so the sacrifice that is made doesn't go in vain. And I'm going to have three guests on with along with myself. We're going to have Russ Hamilton, retired sergeant from CDCR, Joe Pomponio, retired lieutenant out of Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and James Ferreira Butch, who is the retired deputy commissioner out of Massachusetts, where the incident occurred. And again, it's going to be a quick dialogue. I want people to know it's not out to Monday Night Quarterback, because it's not what we're about. We're about giving education. And having said that, even if there are mistakes that we feel that are made, we're not pointing them out in an effort to say we know more, because that's not what we're trying to do. It's just hope that we don't make those mistakes again. Everybody involved in this video, the officers that responded, the officer that was taken down by the inmate, they're all heroes, every one of them. I'm a big fan of all the work that's done out in Massachusetts, and they trust me to do videos like this. So I want to make sure I do them justice. So I do want to first start off by saying for our heroes in Massachusetts, thank you for what you do. You truly are heroes behind those walls. And please, hopefully you take this video as a way to just get the message out there so people know. And then I'm also going to promote the GoFundMe page shortly for Matt Tidman. But let me go ahead and give my sponsors. My first sponsor is American Military University. Whoa, that's a small logo. Hold on, I don't want to lose them. I always do that. There it is. American Military University. Guys, if you're looking to go back to school, seek a higher education, guys, please check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do in Tier Talk, and just they've been with me for years, guys, since day one. So please, if you're going to go back to school, maybe you could put your money where people support what we do. So again, American Military University. We also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit GuardianRFID.com for more information. Guys, they're also very supportive of what we do. Ken Daly, his whole team out there, they also have content that we put up there, tips. Russ got videos up there. James, Joe's been putting some videos up there with me. Steve Menard, William Young. I mean, the list goes on. So if you guys get a chance, please check out their YouTube channel. Also, my book, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison, My Journey from Officer to Administration, is now out, and it's available on Amazon. The link is in the description. Guys, if you want to take your correctional career up a notch, you really should check out this book. I wish this book was available when I began my career. And we also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded, which is also on the market. Good partnership book, if you will. And that is also, link to that is also in the description. So first, let me get Russ Hamilton on. Hey, Russ, what's going on? Good to see you.
Hey, Anthony, it's good to be here.
Hey, Russ, just before we go into the main dialogue, well, first, let's introduce yourself. Do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
I never mind doing that. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I also have experience in the juvenile realm as a senior correctional officer. Currently, I work for a private company, and we have contracts with a local probation department and a jail, where I am the case manager there. And so I just have, a long line of different correctional, jobs behind me at this point.
All right. Well, first off, thank you what you do. And you have that Facebook page, right? The Facebook group, Keepers of Chaos. That's going well, correct?
Yes, Keepers of Chaos. We are a Facebook page for everything that has to do with the profession, and we keep it professional there. The goal, the aim is to, train people, to give them knowledge, to talk about the history of corrections, and to just be supportive for everyone that does this hard job, and that includes custody and non-custody alike.
All right. And I also want to bring on Joe real quick. Joe, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yes, definitely. Good evening. My name is Joe Pomponio. I am a retired lieutenant with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice of 30 years, of which 26 and a half I spent as a lieutenant. And currently stay retired, but however, my love's still in the profession. So I try to help out Anthony and Russ as much as I can and try to contribute to the community and make it more united and a better place to work.
Now, guys, before I bring on my final guest, I just want to tell you guys something. I don't usually do this. My channel's not monetized. I'm pretty much well taken care of from my sponsors. And actually, even after today's episode, I'm going to give away 3 books. So if you guys want, I'm going to look for the people in the comments. If you say, I want a book, I want a book, I want a book, I'm going to look for the 3. And I'm going to go ahead and, we got to find a way. So you know what you should do? Maybe email me, gangianthony@yahoo.com, gangianthony@yahoo.com. And if you go ahead and email me, the first 3 who email me will go ahead and get a free book. This book right here, guys, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. So it's the first 3 that email me. And trust and believe, we'll be doing it again, but I can only do so many at a time. But I would like to ask, if you guys are watching this, I'm going to dedicate this show to 2 heroes. As we mentioned, one is Matt Tidman, who has a GoFundMe page, which I'll show you guys shortly. But before we get to Matt Tidman, I would also like to dedicate the show to Jim Hall, who also has a GoFundMe page. And before I forward the show over to Russ and Joe, because they kind of know him a little bit better, I just want to mention what my dealings with Jim Hall. Jim Hall, I know him for many years, again, mostly through social media, but he has been truly a supporter of everything I've ever done. From the Tier Talk YouTube channel to the crazy keynotes to whatever it is. He seems to always be in the background, either sharing my posts, just giving me the thumbs up in the messages, because he kind of knows when you're feeling down, and he kind of knows, let me just get that message out there. And even in times when he's going through now, he's still trying to give us hope in the things that we're doing. And to me, Jim Hall is not just a hero because he works this profession. He's just a hero because of who he is as a person. And what I would like to do is maybe pass it over to Russ and Joe to go ahead and share a little bit of Jim Hall's story. And then I'm going to show you, I have the link to Jim Hall's GoFundMe page in my description. But I would like maybe if Russ could start off by sharing us why the need for the GoFundMe page for Jim Hall.
Okay, so basically the whole reason behind the GoFundMe for Jim Hall is he is battling cancer right now. He's been extremely ill, and so we're just trying to do a few things to help him lighten the load and so forth. Jim has been my buddy now for many years, and it really all started with Jim and I when I started Keepers of Chaos. I started Keepers of Chaos, and I really needed somebody to come in and to be there and to be able to get people in and to vet them and to actually go out there and take the time and effort. And it's very low pay. I've paid these guys absolutely nothing, but him and Jack Mosley were with me from the very beginning. And Jim was just a superstar. He's always there. He's always in the background. He's always, making sure that things are running smooth and, disciplining our little flock when necessary and making sure that things run smooth. And he's just done that day in and day out for years. And so this is just, a chance to try and help him through what's been the hardest time of his life so far.
Joe, do you have anything you'd like to say? I know you guys got a chance to communicate with him.
We did. We got the chance to talk with him last night. He's still in high spirits given his current situation. Jim is what I call the epitome of integrity when it comes to support for the correctional community. He's always there with positive words, positive criticism. He's always been one of our biggest supporters as far as the correctional community. I know every time that I had posted something that either happened while I was on duty or, whatever the case was, he was always there to offer words of support, to try to lift us up. And after me and Russ spoke a little bit, we thought that doing the GoFundMe would be our way to help lift him up. I'm thankful we got to talk to him last night. He was very giddy, very happy. His wife was very happy at the fact that, we got to FaceTime with him and it made his day. And I'm glad we were able to do that. And I hope we can do a little bit more to help ease his burdens.
And guys, he is someone that not only has an impact on the profession, he has a huge impact on the people that have an influence over this profession. And again, if you needed $1 and all he had was $1, he'd give you $1.50. I mean, that's just who he is. And what I mean by $1.50, I mean himself. I mean, he would give you 150% of himself. So guys, if you ever wanted to show support to a brother, especially if you're on Keepers of Chaos, if you're just watching this video, any support would be greatly appreciated. Let people know how much he means to us, because again, he is someone that is very important, again, not just to this profession, but to our lives. So Jim Hall, this episode's for you, brother. All right. Let's get Butch on. James, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Anthony, what's going on?
James, you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
I don't. James Ferreira, retired from the Massachusetts Department of Correction, Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the Northern Sector. I did 35 years, 9 months in Massachusetts. I started as a correction officer, and just happy and pleased and feel honored to take part in Tier Time.
Tier Talk.
Tier Talk, okay.
We're honored to have you, but Tier Talk. It's all right.
Tier
Time. It is what it is. So guys, so what I want to do first is let's first give an update. So recently, I think it's about 12 days ago. What is it? Was it September 4th? It's about 12 days ago. So let me go ahead and show you this video real quick, guys. Just bear with me. I'm going to share one more video. And it is right here.
Friends and family of a corrections officer who was attacked by an inmate at MCI Shirley last week are raising money to help cover his medical expenses. Officer Matt Tidman remains in critical condition following Wednesday's assault. A GoFundMe page has been started for him. According to the WBZI team, an inmate struck Tidman with a metal object, knocking him unconscious. That inmate has been placed in isolation while the attack is under investigation.
Now, that's a very brief video, but I do want to let you guys know we do have the link to his fundraiser as well. That's also in the description. Let me just show you a picture of that here. So far, he's doing very well, $102,000, and that's showing a lot of love. I'd like to thank the news for actually giving that shout out, and I'd also like to thank the people that put this together. Looks like it was done by Brandy. She's organized on behalf of the Tidman family. As many of you know, Officer Matt Tidman was the victim of brutal attack by an inmate while on duty. While Matt fights for his life and remains in critical condition, his family remains by his side. Matt is someone who's first to lend a helping hand, no matter the situation, and now is our time to do the same for him and his family. Anything helps and is greatly appreciated. So I got an update on this. Now, we do have the video, guys. I'm going to show you the video. Again, it's not something easy to watch, but I believe it's something we should watch, especially if you're in the field. And then we're going to go ahead and discuss what we feel could be some concerns. But I want to first start by reading the update that I just got. It's from 7 hours ago. And by the way, just mentioned, I'm getting a lot of love from the Massachusetts Department of Corrections in regards to wanting to post this up. They've been messaging me, and I wanted to make sure I did it right. That's why it took me a little bit of time. But once the video came out, I felt that it was time now. I mean, at that point, the video's out. Other people are going to get their hands on it. So I rather do my best with this crew here of experts to give us a fair breakdown, because other people are going to give it, and I'd rather it come from us because we're the ones that actually know the profession, as opposed to probably the former inmate channels that are going to run it in their own way. So, so again, this article comes from David Dorr, and it says, I'm going to read what it says, but it says Union guard, so we correctional officer, but guard at Shirley Prison attacked by inmates improving ever so slightly. Correctional officer from the Massachusetts Correctional Institution, Shirley, is slowly recovering from an attack by an inmate last month. According to Massachusetts Corrections Officers Federated Union, MCOFU, Matthew Tidman is still on life support at a local hospital after the inmate beat him several times with a piece of gym equipment August 31st. Okay, guys, so it's August 31st it happened. So I apologize on that. So August 31st. The date that I was going by, I was counting 12 days from that YouTube video, but I guess the YouTube video was the announcement of the GoFundMe page. The attack occurred while Tidman, a central Massachusetts resident, was on duty in the medium security section gym area. And guys, this does not look like a guard. That looks like an officer to me. Just want to show that picture there. That's an officer. So he has had less medical intervention over the last few days, and the family is encouraged. So this is coming from the union legislative representative, Kevin Flanagan, and he has not regressed and is showing some signs that he may be improving ever so slightly. The last 2 weeks have been full of rage and anger that such a violent assault was levied onto one of our own. As always, we've been able to come together and support one another when we need the support the most. This will have a lasting impact on all of us, and we need to stay strong. All right, so what I want to do, guys, is I guess we could talk a little bit about the situation that before we get to the assault. How did the inmate get to that facility? So I do have another article I want to read real quick to give us a little bit of a backstory. I was hoping to find something on YouTube with this so it'd be easier, but YouTube doesn't have a video. The only video they had was the GoFundMe. So let me go ahead and read you the video. Read you the article before we go into the video so we get a little bit of a history of who the inmate is as well, so we know exactly who we're dealing with. So let me get back to sharing the screen again. And then we're going to go to this. All right. So, surveillance video shows convicted murderer with gym privileges beating corrections officer Matt Tidman with gym equipment. And we'll explain what gym privileges mean. Just bear with us. So, we have obtained video surveillance footage from Shirley Medium Prison of the planned attack on corrections officer Matt Tidman at the hands of inmate Roy Booth that put Tidman into a medically induced coma. We must warn you that the video is disturbing, which we'll show you. Just a reminder that Roy Booth was transferred to Shirley from Virginia because he assaulted too many COs down there. And for some reason, we decided to take him in. When he got here, he told the CO that he would stab him or any other guard the first chance he got because he had nothing to lose. So this here is the inmate. There's his disciplinary reports. Just to give you a little history of that. That's an MCI Shirley, which is a medium facility. We'll have Butch in a little bit explain the differences in statuses, maybe based on restriction. That is Tidman. That's the officer that was assaulted, as you saw on the GoFundMe page. Now, despite this declaration of an intent to hurt officers, Booth wasn't sent to Salsa Baranowski, which is a maximum security facility, but he was given gym privileges. He then disassembled a weightlifting set, held onto a bar, and lay in wait for the right time to strike. As soon as the other CO started walking away, he viciously stuck up from behind Tidman like a coward that he is and bashed him in the head. And again, you could kind of see it in the pictures here, but we will show you the video. He then struck his lifeless body 3 more times as other prisoners looked on and got the hell out of there, lest they were accused of working with him. Within seconds, other COs had tackled him to the ground and restrained him. Amazing they can do that without guns, baton, tasers, or pepper spray. Think of how crazy it is to be a CO in a place like this. It's just you and most violent people in the state, many of whom have nothing to lose and have no problem killing someone because they're in there for life anyway, and all you have to protect yourself is your fist. These defenseless public servants are the people that politicians like James Eldridge and Liz Miranda spend to choose to spend their time vilifying. And it's funny because we just saw an article about Liz Miranda. Someone sent me that, right, James? So James, first off, James, let's talk about these interstate compacts. So obviously some states do have compacts with other states, and sometimes they trade off inmates. How does that happen?
So you're absolutely right, Anthony. Many agencies enter into compact agreements where they will take an inmate that needs to be moved outside their agency and placed in another agency for many different reasons. Could be for protective custody type issues, could be to mitigate any retaliation type of issues from staff based on a serious assault. Could remove him from, get him further away from some of his partners in crime. There's many different reasons why inmates move from one state to the other. But when they do that, normally it's not just you send one to us. It's usually a swap. So you'll send an inmate to, let's say, Virginia in this case. And I think that's what happened in this case. We sent an inmate, Massachusetts sent an inmate to Virginia. Virginia sent in a return, we've got this gentleman here.
Yeah, and guys, I want to mention something, and I'll go with Russ too. So sometimes when you have these interstate compacts, it could be because maybe there are concerns with having that inmate housed in that state or in that facility. So the best bet is to move the inmate out. That could be for safety and security reasons, both for maybe the state or the facility, or for the inmate. Or sometimes the inmate makes a request, because you could have inmates that commit crimes in other states, but maybe they don't live in those states, so they want to go back home. And sometimes if you have a contract with that state, you can send that inmate back to their home state. And that also, again, if it's an inmate that is really trying to make the effort to do something right, not like the person we see here, sometimes that helps, because if you get the inmate closer to their family could become a resource. But having said that, if the moment the inmate decides, hey, I no longer want to be here, I want to go back, because the inmate voluntarily went there, there's going to be all efforts to bring that inmate back. Now, the difference here is when the inmate does go to another state and they commit a crime, there's no chance that they're going to go back anytime soon, for the most part, because they're going to have to deal with what just occurred. And I think that's what should be happening here with this inmate. And it looked like this inmate, as I said, was transferred out of Virginia because he had multiple attacks on CO. So right off the bat, if that was an inmate that, let's say, was coming to my state, because I don't know much about this inmate, all I have is the disciplinary sheets. And again, the severeness of it all, those attacks, I'm going to put him in the most restrictive housing as possible, at least at first, because they're going to have to show me what they're about. I need to know how they're going to work with staff. And I think the best way to do that is to put them in a very restrictive area. And I'm basing that based on their history, because I want people to know something. When you bring an inmate to another state, that's not a reset button. That's not, oh, let's give the inmate a fresh start. That's like, hey, we still got to, deal with this inmate's behavior, and let's figure out from there, what we can do. But the best way to do that is to put that inmate in a restrictive area and have it as controlled as possible. So, Russ, if you had an inmate like that that's coming from the state of Virginia that has a history of that, and then they're getting ready to come to your state, what would you expect should be done by the people that are facilitating the actual transfer, but also once the inmate is to be placed in the facility, based on those reasons?
Yeah, all of the things with regard to that have to start, weeks or possibly even months before you move an inmate, especially one like that. And that's kind of where, your classification specialists should be taking over. And the first thing they should be doing is looking at the crime of the inmate, his previous crimes, how long he's sentenced for, and of course, the all-important, disciplinary aspect. What's he getting in trouble for? Is he getting in trouble for smoking cigarettes, or is he getting in trouble for assaulting staff? So, the fact that he had, apparently, multiple previous staff encounters, to me, that's an indicator that, he should have been, locked down in a security housing unit, ADSEG, whatever, until they had a chance to thoroughly review everything. And then after that, everything else that he earns from that point forward, should all be based on him having, a sterling, spotless disciplinary record. And in this case, just from what little I know of it, it appears to me that, there was some gap there. There was, someone really, truly fumbled the ball, because that individual, in my mind, should have been in a security housing unit.
Right. And Joe, just from your perspective, Joe, if you got an inmate that is coming, let's say, out of state to your state, but they're coming with all these restrictions, when they get to your state, you wouldn't lower the restrictions. Would you, if you have a maximum inmate that's coming your way, would you make the decision to keep them medium? Because I believe, from what I'm thinking of, is that even though the inmate is sent to your state, you still have to abide by those state rules with those inmates. So if that inmate came to your facility and they're max status, that inmate remains max status. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, yeah, and a lot of it depends on the states too. Like, in our state, when we get him in our custody, he's ours. We don't have to abide by Louisiana's rules. We don't have to abide by whatever state's rules and Department of Corrections that he came from. In a state DOC setting, when we bring him in and do the classification review, we look at the totality, the total, if I could speak correctly, the totality of everything, looking at his history, inside and outside the penitentiary. Is he a high profile inmate? Is he a serial killer? Is he, a high profile inmate on the inside? Is he a major gang leader? We look at everything. But in this instance, yeah, there is no doubt he would not have been walking around general population. I've sat on many committees on our, ICC inmates and, even inmates from other penitentiaries in Texas. Big difference between, this guy's record and, me getting a medium custody inmate, that was downgraded from minimum to medium custody just because he refuses to go to work. This guy assaulted numerous staff. And during the classification, he says, not only am I going to assault you, but I'm going to assault every correctional officer I can get my hands on. Yeah. Okay, secure housing unit, here we come. Once if he decides to get his heart right and work his way back up, that's on him. But, him coming in with that record, yeah, to me, that should have been automatic.
Right. And my thing with this too, guys, just a couple of things, touch back a little bit. So some states, when you make that contract, there are certain things in the contract that the state has to follow. And that's kind of where the deals are made. So there are certain states that will honor, especially, I'll give you an example. If you're a state and you're getting a federal inmate, the federal system will actually go to your facility and check to see how you're housing their inmates, because those inmates are supposed to be allowed to have certain things or certain rights or certain functions. And the federal prison is very big on auditing the facilities that are state facilities that may have their inmates because of transfers. But my first thing is this. I know sometimes when you get inmates that are in highly restrictive areas, we tend not to want to write them because we know it may be superficial in the long run. So you learn how to manage things through communication. But there are certain things that you have to write. And if this inmate had a history of making these threats, I'm hoping that those threats were documented, every single one of them. Because, it's great that he said it. But then my incident as management is the first, I would say, well, okay, guys, he said it, but was the inmate ever charged for it? Because the only way I'm going to know if the inmate said those things is if the inmate was charged, or was there something there to produce, have the inmate go through the hearing or whatever it is? Do we have something on a documentation that he made these threats? Now, mind you, he shouldn't even be in this facility to begin with, but I just want to get this thought out there so people know. An inmate makes a threat to you, it's never subjective into regards to how you feel that threat is. It's a threat. I don't care if you believe that the inmate can never carry it out, because they probably could. You just don't know. Anytime an inmate makes a threat, that's always something worth putting on paper, because these are things that are going to have to be documented. Because again, one is, kind of puts the scarlet letter on that inmate. Got to be careful how we handle this inmate. A threat is a threat. A threat to one staff is a threat to all staff. but also it gives higher up information about this individual. So if we need to ever later on use something to place them in high restrictive housing, we got a list of those threats. However superficial you may feel, a threat is still a threat. What's your thoughts on that, James, when it comes to documenting threats, even if you feel the inmate doesn't have the means to carry it out?
Well, the old saying is, if it's not documented, I guess it didn't happen. And people are going to use that. You know, these types of things certainly seem to come out after an incident, not quite like this, but usually you'll hear later on that, oh, the guy made a threat, or the inmate made a threat, and, you know, it wasn't documented. But if it's not documented, it's not going to be considered in the inmate's placement. So for those type of things to be considered in the inmate's placement, it needs to be documented. And in that case, if he made a threat, he'd go through the disciplinary process, and if found guilty, there'd be some points associated with that. In Massachusetts, they classify inmates by a national point-based classification system. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that.
It's an objective scoring.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of things into consideration. It takes the inmate's crime, his age, his adjustment,
history of violence, which includes
history
threats.
of violence. And it gives a numerical or a number score associated with each one of those questions, and they tally up the total, and then the total, depending on maximum security, medium security, or minimum security, they fall within the score.
Yeah, like I'll give you an example, if I may. So for Jersey, you can kind of find this in 10A, but you have a scoring system of 4 points or down will get the person minimum. Unless they're female, they're a little bit more forgiving. I think it's 5 and down.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's medium, it's going to be 5 to 11, and the maximum is 12 and above. And by the way, guys, these inmates are going to try to work down the score to try to get it to 4 and try to work their way to minimum, unless there's an override, because the override can stop them from getting minimum. That could be based on their crime, the likelihood of them reoffending, whatever it is. But even a threat. So here's the unique thing. A threat could give somebody 5 points automatically. It's a history of violence, and it could last on their record for 5 years. So a lot of inmates, they don't want to be foolish because they know that those 5 points don't come off for 5 years. So if they're already scoring high, let's say their offense partnered with that history of violence, that could give them an 11 right off the bat. So, and again, they need a 4. So they really have to work themselves down. So that violence, those threats, that gives you 5 points automatically for 5 years. So for officers or staff that aren't writing that, another thing that you're doing is you're allowing the inmate to circumvent and eventually get themselves to maybe a minimum unit if they, start to quiet themselves down. That's why it's very important that you note those threats, because they have long-term consequences that the inmates actually do start to feel when they get past that moment of impulse. Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts? Because Russ actually went through it, guys. Russ was threatened, and it has been carried out. So, Russ, from your perspective, is there really any such thing as a superficial threat?
Oh, heavens no. That has to be a thing where you take a lot of effort to be able to document everything correctly, because, God forbid you don't take it seriously and then something happens. How do you explain yourself afterwards? And, if you're hurt and, potentially you have a workman's comp claim or something like that, you could end up in some legal troubles with regards to, whether or not you're going to get, maybe part of your pension or all of your medical paid for. I would just always make sure that whatever came my way in regards to a threat, that I would always, document it, that I would always charge the inmate with a said threat. No matter how, light it might seem, I don't care if he's the scrawniest, puniest guy on the yard, you still should be documenting that. Later on, you never know, one of these guys that makes a threat that you think that you can handle, but he brings 2 or 3 other people, with him, or he sends someone after you. He pays someone, a honey bun donut to go up and crack you in the head with a broomstick. I mean, it's all fair game out there, and you never know how a threat is actually going to manifest itself. And that's the real problem, is that we can't just look at things on a face value and say, well, that's not really a threat. Well, you don't know, because the way things do manifest themselves in prisons is far different from the way the outside world works, generally speaking. And when an inmate says something, you don't know whether or not he's actually going to follow through with it. Because if you start projecting onto the inmate, well, I wouldn't do that. He's just lashing out just verbally. You have no way to assess that. You don't know what he's been involved in the past. Just because he has a record, even if you go back and look through it, doesn't mean that it's going to be the tell-all about how he runs his life and what an actual threat he may present.
Yeah, and guys, I want to also mention something too, to partner with what Russ is saying. When the inmate makes the threat and it gets passed up through documentation, the investigative authorities can get involved. And what they do is they could put the inmate in a holding cell, a temporary administrative housing, while they could evaluate to see if there's a validity to the threat. Because as Russ mentioned, the threats aren't just through the institution. It could be the guy can make a phone call, or they know when you leave work, they could have somebody waiting for you. So it kind of slows things down for a second to see if we can get some level of control. But the last thing you want to do is to subjectively not take any threat seriously. Again, I don't care how superficial it is, because it's only superficial till it's not, and again, I will be honest with you, even when an inmate makes a threat, it's a great way through documentation to show them who really controls the house. Because at that point, a threat is also a shift in who has control. When an inmate is making a threat, that's an inmate's opportunity to try to intimidate or coerce. So I think our best bet in return is to document and show them who runs the house. Hey, I know you just threatened me, but I'm not afraid of it. And here's what we're going to do. You're getting charged, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to have that heard through court line. What's your thoughts on that as a lieutenant, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. Document it each and every time, because, even though the threat may be directed towards you, 6 weeks down the line, that threat may be directed towards somebody else. Even though, regardless of whether you think it has validity or not, document it. That's the one thing I can say about Texas is we have a wonderful classification system. Documents everything. We have charges for threats that document everything. And, and the one thing, one of the things I look at is, if Hamilton threatens me today, and 6 weeks down the line, Butch pisses him off, and Hamilton decides to go after Butch, and actually does go after Butch. When everything's said and done, and he's brought up the classification to look at his custody level, they could say, well, I mean, hell, Hamilton's been threatening folks for, the last 6 months. Because if you don't document it, later on down the line, somebody else may not know this guy's history. You have to document it, because, people, even in classification, they change routinely, may transfer out to other departments, and you're bringing in new people. They don't know the background on this inmate. And if there's no documentation in his classification file, there's no charges in his disciplinary file. You basically got no meat to sink your bone into, sink your teeth into the bone. If you want to downgrade his custody level, make him more restrictive. You got to have that trail. You got to have that paper trail.
Yeah, and I want to mention something too in regards to what Joe's saying. The paper trail really does matter, because it also puts the facility in a position to act. And if they fail to act, well, you've documented this, and those failures will show up if shit hits the fan. So again, the documentation for so many reasons must be done. Now, before we go to the video mentions privilege rec. So I want people to know something. There's a difference between privilege and rights. Rights are something that staff really don't have control of. That's something that the inmates are entitled to. And trust and believe, if you're taking away an inmate's rights, there's phone calls that have to be made before that's even thought about. But privileges are stuff that the inmate earns. This is stuff that, was awarded to them through good behavior. And, it could be usually stuff as extra rec time, whatever it is. So when you have an inmate that is saying these things, if that was documented, and has a history of violence against officers, and that's why we have them here, my question is, why would you give the inmate privilege rec? So let's do this video real quick. And then we're going to go ahead and we'll break it down. But I'm going to run the video right now. Just give me a second. All right, hold on. It's a little blurry, but bear with me. I'm going to run it twice.
Can you make it bigger?
I could try the next time. Hold on. Yeah, I could do that. Make it bigger. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Hold on 1 second. Then when it starts over again, I'll do it on the bigger screen. Thanks, Russ. Hold on. All right. Bear with me. I'm going to rewind it again. Sorry about that. All right, so what I'll do is I'll go with Russ first. So Russ, as you're seeing this video, I mean, what comes to your mind? I'll replay it again while you're talking about it.
Yeah, the first thing is this is just a situation that happens so quickly. He's only, he only momentarily turns his back, which means that the inmate had before this actually prepared to do this. This was the game plan. This is the way it was going to go down. And you see that as soon as his back is turned, and that's why we have to be so careful about tactical distancing and about, maintaining, safety on our six like that. Good response by the staff. They got in there and took him immediately to the ground. They didn't mess around, and they were able then to, subdue him and get him controlled. My bigger thing coming to this, less about the incident and more about the circumstances, is in California, we just gave up. We took away the weights, the exercise bars, and we replaced them all with just, static bars that they could do, pull-ups and dips and things like that on, because these guys, they got so monstrously big. I mean, we don't have the time to prep like they do. So they were a big threat to us. They were a big threat to, other inmates. I saw the founder of the Crips, Tookie, just, doing bench presses, reps, 10 or 12 of them at a time with 500 pounds on there. I mean, how are we supposed to compete with that? And then there's the safety of those weights themselves. We just saw that this officer attacked. There were times that, we had numerous fatalities out there on the weight piles, and then we finally got rid of them, thank goodness. But, having loose, heavy things around in a prison yard is just generally a bad idea. So I'm real high on what California decided to do instead with the static bars. The only place now that I still understand, I checked it out tonight, is they have weights out at the fire camps, but not at any of the facilities with secure perimeter.
Now, the only thing that's unique is obviously this gym's a bigger area. So the officer probably has his attention elsewhere and the inmate catches it. But what's weird is when staff come in to stop him, he doesn't make the effort to start swinging. He starts to pull back, but it looks like he still had his eyes on Officer Tidman. Like, usually if an inmate's coming after officers in general, when the response team comes and they know they're coming, they're going to stop attacking the person that they're attacking. And then they're going to go ahead and go for the response team, because I've seen that happen. So my first thing I'm thinking of is that when I saw his focus was strictly on Tidman, even when the team is coming, it makes you think that this inmate had something personal, because I've seen inmates like, I'm going to stir something up. I'm going to go after this one officer. When the team comes, they back up and they're ready to go at the team. This person was totally focused on on Tidman. And another concern I have, and I'll maybe ask Russ one more question here, is we've had this discussion before. I'm not a real big fan of officers walking around mess and walking around yards. And I know the presence is needed. Don't get me wrong. I get it. But just that there's technology there that we could really see, and then we could respond if need be. It's weird for me, especially with facilities that are understaffed now, to have officers walking in rec and walking in like a chapel, an open chapel, or because it just sets up the perfect opportunity for an assault or a hostage situation. But what's your thoughts? I know you may be on the other side of this, but especially with understaffed facilities, what's your thoughts on still walking around that mess hall or walking around like a rec area, Russ?
Well, it's absolutely, more dangerous to do it that way. Unfortunately, many of the facilities that I worked at were older facilities. I was the seating officer at San Quentin for many years in that dining hall for breakfast. And, all I can say, it was dangerous AF. I mean, I was involved in all kinds of stuff in there. And then later, even after I transferred, we had, very small but crowded chow halls at times with, 200 or 300 inmates in each little section. And so we absolutely had to have a presence in there just because there was literally, due to the bad effect of the design, no other way to do it. So I think that, now that we're starting to get into the area of, we're delivering meals to units and passing them out one by one and not having great congregations of inmates in other areas, and trying to, have, decentralized everything whenever possible, that's good. And so, I think that takes a lot of the heat out of every single, riot and every other thing that happens there. But the older generation of prisons and jails, just in many times, it doesn't lend itself towards that kind of change. I mean, they're built the way they are, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I'll go to Joe on this. One of my concerns here when I was watching this video is when the video resets itself and it goes back to the beginning. My concern is where the inmate is at first, behind that wall, and the way he's standing. I mean, right off the bat, you feel that, okay, you know what? There's something happening here. What's up? Why is he in? Because to me, that's a bit of a blind spot. I would tell the inmates that if you're going to be out in this area, maybe you have to be past that line, or you have to be made visible. If I can't see you, that's a problem. So I would bring the inmate out to a more visible area. I know that in some facilities, what they tend to do is when they want to make sure that inmates are, hold on, let me just stop this. When inmates, you want to keep them visible. I'll give you an example. You don't want inmates leaning against the fence and rec, so you paint a line. And if they go past that line, they can get charged or taken out of yard. Inmate being against the wall, be like, I think you got to get into the area, because if I can't see you, that's a problem. I mean, what's your thoughts, Joe, with that inmate? Again, not Monday night quarterbacking, but just letting people know what we see so we can go back and just be more informed next time. What was your thoughts on that that inmate leaning against the wall, kind of out of sight?
Yeah, definitely looked suspicious and out of place, without a doubt. Everybody else is doing something, either passing the ball, playing hoops. Everybody was doing something except for him. He was the only one, out of sight, out of mind, against the wall, not doing anything. And it just, you just tell it was suspicious from the get-go.
Yeah. And then let me show it one more time real quick, because and
the other question I had was the two employees that took him down. To me, it looked like they were wearing red shirts and shorts.
Yeah, I can explain that if you'd like.
Yeah, if you would, because that kind of piqued my curiosity.
So in Massachusetts, there's a couple of different positions. There's a correctional officer there. You can tell who those two folks are in uniform. And then
right,
the other two employees, those are rec staff. Those are recreation officers, I believe, that have a little different uniform. And they cover gyms. They run the recreational activities. They do a couple other things with volunteers and rec staff, although they're correction officers, but they have a little bit different role. It would appear that there was two on duty there in the gym when that incident occurred, and it would appear that they responded, and as a correction officer would respond. Absolutely.
And James, what's your thoughts? Like even after the officers responded, the other inmates still walking around. I mean, what would be? I mean, you have expertise in this area. What would be the initial response? I mean, yeah, you got the threat down, but would there be any effort from the officers to try to control the environment as well?
They should. That was a very quick clip. A matter of seconds had went by. When the rec staff looked like, again, it would appear that those rec staff observed that vicious attack. So their number one priority, I think, was to stop it, regardless of their safety or whatever the other inmates were doing. I think they just got tunnel vision and wanted that to stop, and I certainly understand that. And that's what you just saw. Now, as the other correction officer comes in from the right-hand side there, again, he may have seen the attack too and had more concern for first aid of the correction officer. But yes, you would like to see that those inmates that are kind of milling around and not really being told to get on the other side of that gym. That gym is a lot bigger than what this video is showing. That's a full-size gym. In fact, I think there's two full-size basketball courts in there, if my mind serves me correctly. So yes, it stops before the emergency response gets there. I believe that those officers were all stationed in that area, and I think that video is too short before the cavalry shows up, where you would have seen, I would hope that you would have seen a lot more crowd control, multitasking, not only first aid, getting the nurse and all that different type of stuff, but also crowd control as well, moving those inmates back.
Now, James, if this inmate was in a max setting where he should have been, what would have been the different procedures in handling a wreck like this?
So, I was prepared to talk about that a little bit as I read the article. Maximum security inmates in Massachusetts also get wrecked in a very similar type of area. Not all of them get access to the gym because of their classification within the facility, but in Susan Baranowski, the Massachusetts only maximum security facility, they do get rec deck. They do get a basketball out there. There are no weights, and the rec deck are right off the housing unit. Russ brought up a good point about the physical plant being conducive to certain operations, and this is a good example. Susan Baranowski was built as a maximum security prison, so they have rec decks right off of each housing unit. They really don't have to travel anywhere in the facility to get to this rec deck. It's right outside their cell, across the day room, and boom, they're on these rec decks. And I'm sure you've seen some of those. And Shirley's medium security facility, that gym is across a very big yard, and it's a whole nother building away from the housing unit. So they probably run a couple of different units into the gym at one time. Certainly not the whole population's over there at one time, but and I want to make sure that we understand, that everyone understands the point-based system, that's objective. In fact, it's called objective point-based. So if they have a score, those inmates traditionally go to the facility in which they score out to, unless the only subjective part of it is when they do an override. And that is the question. Did the inmate score it out as a max and somebody overrode him to a medium? I haven't seen anything in articles or any information come out that said the inmate should have been at Susan Baranowski based on his objective score. Now, we can assume, we find it hard to believe that he didn't score out max based on what we know. But I just want to make sure that that's clear. If somebody overrode him to medium security, certainly that is going to be, a big question. But if he scored out to medium security, that's the point-based system. But we don't know that. I'm assuming, based on the information that we know out here, outside, away from it, that he was a maximum security inmate. But that's not. We have no facts that would indicate that.
Yeah, we have something what they call like L overrides.
Yeah, we have overrides.
Yeah, so I've never seen an override in my 20 years, but I'm sure it's happened, that took a maximum inmate and override them to medium. I don't think anybody in their right mind would want to do that. I mean, I can't even think of a circumstance where you would want to do that. But we're always for universal precaution. If there's concerns, you could have inmates that score lower, but it's like, they may score low, but that's not the perfect picture of who this inmate is. So at this point here, because you can have inmates that are high profile crime. Like, I mean, they did some crazy shit, but they score low. But based on their crime, you hit them with that override, and then they stay at the
override can go both ways. You're absolutely right.
I've seen more practice, believe it or not, of the overrides where inmates do lower status, but as something's not right, and you override and you stamp the higher. And usually that's reviewed by a committee and then signed off for some level of higher approval. But I've never seen like a max inmate and then the committee say, you know what, I know he scores this high, but I think we can trust him and let's go ahead and override him to a lower setting. I've never done that, and I think that would be some crazy explanation behind the people that would do that, because again, the scoring system is telling you that the person is a threat. And again, every time you're making a decision, you're filtering it down as if that person could be a threat. So I don't see why, anybody would do it the other way, where the person's max, but let's just give them a chance and give a medium. There's no universal precaution there. The universal precaution comes in when the person's, let's say, scores medium, but it's like, you know what, that person could be a problem. Let's keep them elevated and let's get that override in and play it out as long as we can until either the inmate fights it in court, because that could happen too, but at least the mandate comes from the court. I think the problem here is there could be a chance, and I could be wrong, this is just throwing stuff up in the air, but when you get an inmate from another state and they're coming to your facility, everybody should be in the know of who this inmate is. And I think sometimes that communication could also get lost. I think sometimes the facility could just take an inmate without realizing, we're getting an inmate today, without realizing who that inmate is. And then next thing you know, they're giving that inmate lesser status. And then they find out later on, holy shit, this inmate had all this stuff on his record I didn't know. Because again, people may not be looking at their class folder. So again,
that's why you have a reception and diagnostic center, correct?
You're right. But when you're getting inmates from out of state, they're not going through no form of central reception. They're going right to whatever facility has been proved to be appropriate. So if I'm getting an inmate, let's say from Virginia, they're probably not going to our centralized reception. They're probably going to whatever that facility is that was designated them through the talks when they said we're going to take this inmate. So I know what you're saying, but not if you get an inmate that's let's say you said that this facility wanted to trade inmates, right? The inmate that's coming from the state is probably not going through like a jail to state reception. They're going to go right to a state facility. They're not going to go to you know how, like, okay guys, just to give you a little heads up, if an inmate gets sentenced to state time, when they're ready to go, they go from the jail to what would be a centralized reception area, and they'll figure out what facility is best for that inmate. And that's great because classification's involved. They get this quick review, and then they make the determination as to what facility fits best for the inmate. This doesn't always happen when you get an out-of-state transfer. They may not go to that centralized reception area and be looked at by classification. They may just go directly to a facility, and that may actually they may overlook that initial intense initial classification. Because guys, you have two scores here. You have the annual review scores, but you also have the initial intake scores on an inmate. So when they first come in, they're given an initial intake score. I think, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure if they're coming from out of state on some deal, they're just going right to another facility. I don't know if they go through some initial intake. I don't know if that information is passed. I mean, I'll go with Russ first, and I'll go back to you, James. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? When you have those interstate transfers, are they going to a centralized reception, or are they going right to what would be their main facility?
I got to say that that's really outside my wheelhouse. What I would be more concerned with is, why is this state want to get rid of this guy so bad? We talked about it a little bit in pre-show. And you know what? If they're just wanting to get rid of the guy, maybe not all the information is making it there for a reason. So I'm always suspicious, but that's why I've lived so long.
Well, what's your thoughts on that, Joe? Are you familiar with the out-of-state?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, it happens exactly the way he said it, Anthony. They don't go through any kind of intake diagnostic review before they go to a unit of assignment. Not like if you're sentenced to state time, you come from the county jail, you go to the TDC diagnostic unit. It's where they do all your sociology intake, your, everything before they classify you for your permanent unit of assignment. With ICC inmates, they basically go from unit to unit. And,
right. I actually would.
Now, a lot of the times we would put them in what we call a transit status, because sometimes, sometimes you get them from states where they still have manual classification folders. Mm-hmm. With, their disciplinary history and sociology and all that stuff in it. Sometimes it comes digital, and sometimes it does not come with the inmate. So, just to err on the side of caution, we'll put them in a secure housing unit in what we call a transient status. Same status that we use for offender protection investigations. We put them in there until we can actually get our hands on their classification folder or their classification disc. And at which point then we'd go ahead and, bring them up. 9 times out of 10, we would have it within, 72 hours of us receiving the inmate. And within 72 hours, once we're receiving our facility, not only do we got to run them through classification, we also got to do their safe prisons interview for the PREA stuff. So yeah, there's really no diagnostic in between the two facilities. When an ICC compact is made with another state facility, you're basically trading one for one, and they're going directly to a unit of assignment based on their current classification and their custody level of where they are right then and there.
Yeah, and that's what I think. Butch, I think like the biggest concern here, and I think we're actually all on the same page, is that I think what I was trying to get at is there's going to be less. There's going to be less communication, because a lot of the times, believe it or not, we get caught up in what is automatic. A lot of things when you get inmates, things are running automatic. You get it from central reception, and everything just filters through automatic. That management just kind of assumes that things are running normal. But then this is where it has to be most intentional, when you have to communicate, when you have to know why you're getting that inmate, and what's happening and what I need to do when that inmate gets here. So I think this is where there could always be a lax, because this is where you have to make effort, because at the other time, effort's going to be done automatic. But when the person's coming not from central reception, but directly to your facility, you got to make phone calls and say, hey, why am I getting him? What's this inmate about? And this is more of an intentional effort. So, I mean, if I had an inmate like that was coming my way, I would expect the people that made the deal to say, hey, you got this guy, let me get you his folder right away, because they should also allow to see if this person will be a good fit in the facility. And then we know who we're getting. I mean, sometimes, I'll tell you something, sometimes when we get just in general, when we get a transfer, the higher level custody, like the majors, lieutenant, they'll be on it, because they're looking to see who this inmate is and how they could best be placed. And when that person comes to the facility, we're already, prepared to know how we got to handle this inmate and be ahead of the game. But all that effort is intentional. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, most of the facilities, they kind of run on automatic, and we get caught up, lost in the automatic routine, because it becomes assumed and expected. And then what happens here, like Russ said before, routine complacency. oh, this will be handled, until it's not. And now you have an inmate here that could have kind of made it through the gaps because there was no intentional communication between where this inmate was coming from or who approved it and the direct facility that they were going to. So now you have a problem with, maybe I really don't know how dangerous this inmate is, and we dropped the ball on this, because I think that's what's going to wind up happening. There's going to have to be somebody that dropped the ball, because there's no way that inmate should have been in that medium facility. I think what would have happened was someone like maybe the administrator or superintendent, whatever, should have stood up and said, hey guys, you see what this guy did? He's not appropriate for here. I mean, it's not even so much about the inmate being placed in the wrong facility. It's more about the person that runs that facility saying, why is this inmate here? And then at least put that in documentation saying, hey guys, he's not appropriate here. There's no way I can house an inmate like this in a medium level facility. So it's not so much, it's a lot of shame on the people that put him there, but it's a lot of shame for not speaking up and saying this inmate is not adequate for Shirley. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, James?
So all of those things could have happened. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I would find it, that the system totally broke down if they didn't apply the worksheet and determined his custody level based on the objective point-based classification system, and then assigned him to a facility that was appropriate. Now, I'm not even sure if the guy went to Susan Baranowski first and then ended up at MCI Shirley.
They're saying he didn't go to...
He went straight to Shirley?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the dilemma is.
Yeah, well, perhaps that is. Now, I don't know what he scored out as. And so, I mean, all of those things could have happened. I can't answer to that.
Even at the high, like, even if you're getting an inmate from out of state and, they're coming with this rough record, it doesn't hurt to have that universal precaution and just send them to the most highest restrictive facility and then have them earn their way to the, and again, even it's just for the universal precaution, because look what they said in the newspaper. They said that first thing they said was that he should have been placed at a higher, and it's like, well, let's do that first. Let's at least make the effort to cover that. And then God forbid something does happen later. Okay, well, we went through the precaution. Unfortunately, the inmate, acted impulsively, and this is where we're at. But this looks like there was no effort here, to go ahead and put that inmate in a higher restrictive area. I mean, there's another article too that's out there that puts blame on, I don't know the name, but the superintendent, because he fought for the inmate to get the gym. But here's the concern I have with that too, is that the inmate's in the wrong facility to begin with. So he's only giving the inmate what's required of him based on what the status of that inmate is in that facility. So yep. I get it. The inmate, it's dangerous. I get it. But, I just want to be objective here. So bear with me, guys. Let's play devil's advocate. The inmate's in a medium security facility. So why are we denying him at that point? And every other medium inmate who's considered the same level being allowed gym. I mean, technically, it's not so much about him denying the inmate the gym. It's why is that inmate even in that facility to get the gym? Would that be the better question to ask?
That is the better way of explaining it. Yes, because you're absolutely right. If he's a medium security inmate, how are you going to start restricting privileges without a disciplinary report or some type of sanction? They don't even have, think about trying to manage that. Well, this inmate can't go to the gym. There's 1,000 inmates at that facility.
Right.
And
then, and even though when he made those, when the inmate made the threats, if they were documented, that could have been enough to justify them moving it out. So that's another
could be a sanction.
Area of concern. It could have been a sanction. But having said that, if he was still in GP that day at that medium security facility, it's not, the question is not so much why did he go to the gym? The question is, why is he in that facility? Because we know why he went to the gym. He went to the gym because he's in that facility.
That's right. They had gym call.
They had gym call. Right. As simple as that, guys. He went to the gym because that facility allows those inmates to go to the gym. So why don't we ask the higher level question? Why the hell is he at that facility to begin with. And this is what gets me a little upset too, because what's going to happen is instead of us trying to look at the problem, everybody's going to point fingers and try to blame each other. And then instead of us working together, we become isolated and we get put in survival mode. You know, where's the violation of policy, you know, or like, I mean, you know, it's sad because this is the time we could be getting together. But instead, and this is the unique part of it all, we start putting the flaws on each other. And guess what? No one's holding the inmate accountable. You know, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, we got all this, guys, we get it, but let's just keep our mind focused. Right now, what we got to do, because here's the sad thing, guys, and I want the public to know this real quick, and I'll go with Russ and work my way around. When we start finding out flaws in how we handle that inmate, the lawyers also figure it out. And what they do is they start representing that inmate. And now we're giving that inmate a case, you know, because technically, because we can't get along and we have discovered flaws in the handling of that inmate, the lawyers will see those flaws and use that as an advantage for their case when they're defending the inmate for the brutal assault. So what we need to do is stay on the offensive, because in the end, us pointing out the blame on each other only gives the lawyers a better case when they go to take it. Because I'm sure right now what's going to happen is if I was a lawyer, hey, this inmate's impulsive, as you can see. Why would you put him in a low restrictive unit? If you know the inmate's impulsive, why would you put him there? So now it becomes the environment. You know, it's just how the law works. It's crazy. But in the end of the day, that could be a perspective that we could avoid if we were just more on the same page with what can we do better, and basically, you know, how do we make sure this inmate's held fully accountable? What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, you know, this is going to be one of those things that there's going to be an investigation on, or there's going to be a cover-up held. And so, you know, hopefully, you know, someone is actually going to do the type of review necessary to make sure that this doesn't happen again, rather than try and find a way to cover their ass for the way it went down. And, you know, this is where, you know, the rubber really meets the road, and we just have to look at, you know, the complacency that occurred that allowed this to happen. There is always a chance that, you know, everything actually went the way of the inmate and maybe everyone did do their job. And then if that's the case, then we know that we have an even worse flaw in the system that could allow this to happen over and over again. And at least now it's revealed and we can fix it. But we can't fix it if we're going to do a cover-up.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, Russ, because at the end of the day, first of all, I love that last quote you said about, you know, if we're actually, you know, if it is the system, you know, at the end of the day, if we're working together, we could figure out maybe this is a systematic error that we could fix. And maybe it's not more of an individual, but something systematically that occurred that we can go ahead and go. But here's the biggest concern too, guys. Even if we start blaming each other, we start covering up the mistakes that were made. You know, think about that. You're going to point the finger at me as front line. Well, screw that. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, maybe change a couple of things to make it look like that, hey, it's not my fault. And then management could do the same thing. Hey, you want to blame management? Fuck that. Well, I'm going to start changing a few things. So, because people are going to start going into survival mode. And when people are in survival mode, they do foolish shit. And the last thing we're doing now at this point is discovering what the hell happened. So now we have this major concern that happened. Someone got badly hurt, and we're pushing a survival mode where we're more concerned about our own mistakes and getting in trouble because we're in CYA mode. So what do you do when you're in CYA mode? You survive. You sweep things under the rug. You do what you got to do because you're looking to protect yourself, not protect the facility. And at the end of the day, nothing happens here. There's nothing learned because we don't know the truth. Because instead of us trying to figure it out objectively, we just started attacking each other. We all went into survival mode, and the truth gets swept under the rug in our effort to survive. CYA will destroy facilities because in the end, it will take millions of effort, if people wanted to even find out a fraction of what really happened, and then to go from there and try to make the facility better so it doesn't happen again. Joe, what's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, 90% of our policies come from our past mistakes. You know, that's our way of rectifying things and making sure it doesn't happen again. You know, communication is a big key too between the states. I think honestly, any states that have any interoperability with any of the other states for ICC inmates, I believe they should be connected to a universal system that they all can access. This way, information about the offender can be instantaneous for a classification review to have a better insight into the inmate. And playing devil's advocate, if I was the warden or the lieutenant or whoever was sitting on this committee when this guy came to the facility, one thing was known was that this guy had an assault of previous history on multiple occasions. If I was that warden, if I was that lieutenant or any voting member on that classification committee, I would have recommended that he be, that he would have never seen that gym because he'd have been sent to another facility right off the bat. You can always justify that. Hey, this guy came in with multiple staff assaults, serious staff assaults, and you're putting him on a general population, medium custody facility where the free weight thing. We haven't had free weights in Texas in 25 years. They even took away the mop buckets with the metal ringers. They got the little tidy bowl ringers, so they got rid of all that. That's not a concern. But when you have somebody who is that assaultive, being on that committee, the first thing I would have done was put him in transient status and recommend him a transfer to a more restrictive facility pending a further classification review. Because there's, and that's just me. I'm not pointing the blame at anybody at the facility, but there was a communication drop somewhere. We just don't know where it was.
It's an objective dialogue. I mean, obviously,
Exactly.
I'm assuming Massachusetts at this point would hopefully get rid of the free weights. I mean, remember in PA, the guy Sergeant Basserman was killed by getting stomped on with work boots, and right after PA got rid of the work boots. A lot of states
and as a matter of fact, because of that incident in particular, Texas got rid of the steel toe boots.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm sorry.
Even for the offenders working in industry, they could not wear steel toe boots because of that incident. Because it wasn't too long after that an officer was killed in our shoe factory.
Oh, really? Yeah, because I remember the incident. Sorry, I meant to say the steel boots, but Sergeant Mark Basserman, hero, but he got stomped on by an inmate with those work boots. And to be honest with you, the learning behind that was immediate action. Hey, this is what happened. And there was a fight. These inmates were complaining, hey, sorry, the universal precautions, we can't allow that to happen again. And the other thing too, is when you get this information about the inmates, sometimes it's not passed down to the people that need to know it. So sometimes when you're limited with who you want to give the information to, it really limits the facility as well, because now maybe the one person that knows it, they drop the ball. Holy shit, that's the only person that could have done something about it. So for something like that, I think information should be available to your front line, to your supervisors, because at that point here, what's great is if we have each other's back, if I miss something, let's say going down, they're going to get it coming up. So at the end of the day, we're all together on this. And not that you go to point the blame, but it's like, hey, guys, you could have saw that too. I could have saw it, blah, blah. That's why you have access to it, so we can help each other, because I'm only human. I'm going to miss things, but then you guys can come up. And there's always going to be that one person that says, Gangi, you know a little bit about this guy? Because it's not a problem. You think there's going to be an issue? Hey, thanks for bringing it to my attention. Let's go ahead and let's check this out. So I think the more information that you can give to your people from the front line up helps us be more balanced when it comes to having those resources, because again, you're putting too much on the one person when you limit that information. And 9 times out of 10, to be honest with you, some of these officers may be working around inmates that they don't even know how dangerous they really are, to some extent, because they don't have access. They may only have access from limited resources, where I think, I'm sorry, if that person's in that unit, that officer should have whatever they need to be effective in dealing with that inmate. And I've always been a firm believer of that, because I've worked in facilities where every officer had access to the computer and the inmate's file, especially jails. Jails that I've been to, pretty much every officer could sign on and look at an inmate's rap sheet and all that stuff. But when you get to the prison system, it's not that easy. A lot of officers don't have email access, and the only thing they can get is something superficial. And if they go to even request an inmate's class file, there's private stuff in there, so you really can't give it to them. So there should be something that they can get that really pertains to their ability to do the job. And if it needed, that's, hey, this is what you may need to know about that inmate you got in, and just, if you have any concerns, let me know. James, what's your thoughts on all this with the blaming each other? And, How do we move forward now? What would you expect?
I would expect, for people to be honest and come forth. I mean, you hit it right on the head. When they go into this survival mode, I know, it's difficult for me to sit here. I know some of these people. I know the commissioner. I know that she is an honest person and she's an expert in classification. She's looked upon nationally as one of the, we had objective point-based classification way back when it was new to corrections. And if someone's going in, survival mode and it gets swept under the carpet, it's not going to be fixed. That was a perfect statement where we gotta figure out where the mistake was made. And like I always say, you've heard me say this before, that we need to find those flaws so that we can correct it before it's exposed by the inmate population. Well, this mistake was exposed by the inmate population, it appears. It's easy. We don't have all the information, but it's hard to explain given or knowing that this was an out-of-state transfer. I know it was probably a swap for someone that we sent there, and it wasn't a medium security inmate. It's hard to. There's an answer, and that is the answer. They've got to find out, why the guy was at. There may be a rational explanation for it, but we don't know what that is. What was the inmate doing at medium security? Now, having said that, that could have happened at a maximum security, but there would have been less opportunity for sure.
Right.
Less opportunity. And very, very tragic and unfortunate. And, it's just, I have no answers. I hope there's an investigation, and I hope they find, if there was an override, somebody approved it.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, James, because in the end, like when we push the survival mode, we go from we to me. That's the concern. And I think sometimes when you make a mistake, and I mean, what sucks, guys? People look at a mistake based on the consequences. But a small mistake could have big consequences. A simple overlook could have a major consequence. And I know that we're looked at by the consequence, not so much the mistake, because there are people that could be negligent and they have no consequences. But then there could be people that are good workers, but literally make a mistake, but the mistakes have severe consequences. I think what's best here is when a mistake occurs, that we step up and we just take the hit, because in the end, it's no longer about us. We had an officer that was assaulted. I need to get the truth out there and then let the chips fall where they may, especially if you're the one that made the mistake, because in the end, that's what you have to do. That's what leaders do. I mean, listen, nobody wants somebody to get hurt. I can't think of anybody that's a leader that would want this to happen on their shift. And again, that's the people I've interacted with. The bigger concern is stepping up when it does and saying, I may have been responsible for that. This inmate came in, I didn't do my due diligence. And at the end of the day, this is the end result. But the biggest concern is the people right now that start to cover themselves up because they didn't do their due diligence. Now you start looking at as being a bad leader. Like if someone did make a mistake and they said, I messed up. I mean, okay, what can the union keep saying? This guy admitted he messed up. He stepped right up before anybody even asked, because that's the key too. It's not about stepping up when you've been exposed. It's about stepping up when you realize you fucked up, and then it's like, guys, I already said I made a mistake. I didn't mean to, it wasn't intentional. I got caught up like every other human does in the routine of it all. And I got complacent. It sucks that this was the consequence of it all. So I'm willing to take the hit, whatever that hit may be, because of that consequences. But the funny thing is, human behavior, Russ will tell you, that's why we do classes on it. We all become complacent in the routine of things. We do. It's true. Some people at the highest level, the biggest concern is your routine has major consequences, where somebody at the lower level may not, But having said that, complacency happens. It's caught up in the routine of what it is that we do. and I'm not saying to forgive anybody, but for the people that get caught up in that complacency, one, step up, be honest. And for the people that see it or know what happens, like, hey guys, this guy was already honest. We know we got someone that stepped up. What do we do now? Like, what do we do now? What do we do now to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because we can't keep going back and forth during these roughest of times. This is when we have to be together. The heroes right now are the ones that step up now and say, yo, I fucked up. I fucked up. And am I going to call that person a hero? Yeah, because it takes courage to go ahead and admit that you messed up when the consequences are this big. When the consequences are this big, this is where it matters the most, where you have to step up. But this is when it becomes the hardest to step up. So you will have my respect if you made an honest mistake, complacency, whatever it is, and you step up and you do the right thing, not because you've been exposed, but because you know it's the right thing to do. You got my respect because I can understand that. I could, guys. We all could understand that. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I mean, I walk around a unit all day, and hypothetically, when I was a sergeant, I would see officers with their hands in their pockets. You know, the scariest thing is, guys, it could also be a culture thing too. You know, you could have just a complacent culture. You know, I mean, you could have a mistake at the highest end, but having said that, there could be another opportunity because there's complacency on the lowest end. So when you have complacency at the highest level, meet complacency at the lowest level, you just gave over the facility, 100%. You know, you just gave over the facility to the inmate population. So again, I mean, I think the key from this dialogue is that outside of all of what we learned is we need to step up, admit our errors, so we can make a true, honest fix, so it doesn't happen again. And if you know you did something wrong, and you know you were careless, then step up now, because if not, then we never truly fix the problem, because someone's always protecting something, and that something is the most important piece of what happened. And now it's not going to get exposed. And again, I also want to mention one more thing too before we get to our closing thoughts. The culture of it matters too. If you have a culture that's quick to damn people based on mistakes, you're going to have a culture where people cover shit up. So again, the first thing I would look at is if someone's afraid to admit they made a mistake, regardless of the consequences, afraid even to admit the smallest mistakes, I go for the leadership. So this guy made a simple mistake and they're afraid to admit it. Why is that? Because you're quick to punish everybody? Well, when we have bigger mistakes, they're never going to admit it. So having said that, when it comes to a CYA mode, I look at the highest leader. Are you allowing people to admit their failures, or are you going right to pen and paper? I mean, that to me matters. Hey, Butch, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Very, very, very unfortunate, very, very dangerous, unfortunate incident. If looking at that video, I get the feeling that inmate did that to that officer. Could have been any officer. And I agree with you. He did not step back to attack the other staff responding. He had a purpose of hurting a correction officer for a purpose. He wanted to hurt one. He did that so that he would get some type of result from that. There's objective point-based classification, and they should go by it. If that inmate scored at max, he should be at max. They need to get to the bottom of it. I know that they had a system in place, and I know that we talked about, there was some criticism of the warden. He should have stood up and said, we don't know that he didn't. Maybe he did question, hey, this is a maximum security inmate. What are you doing sending me here? And they may have overrode him and said, you're getting him, and this is why. So they need to do and, find out what the inmate was doing there, and they probably need to be as transparent as possible to let folks know where the error was. They had a good system in place. I can tell you through experience that there was very good communication with folks from out of state, and transfers, and superintendents or wardens had the ability to push back. They had systems in place. With the information that we're being provided with, it doesn't appear that those systems are very strong currently. But that's just with the information that we have. But I'm here to tell you, when we got transfers in, there was discussion. And one of the things that I wanted to also bring up, that in Massachusetts, it's a small agency compared to Texas or California. So, our maximum security prison is our reception and diagnostic center. So, it's one and the same. Um, so, I can't get past, that point where what was the inmate doing at medium security? That leaves them wide open for criticism. It looks like, there was a mistake made. It looks like a mistake was made. We could be all wrong. Maybe he scored out at medium.
So even if he never went to South Baranowski, he avoided like we said, he avoided the central reception.
It would appear so if he went directly to Shirley. If he did, and if he did, if we did an interstate compact swap with a medium security inmate, okay. I mean, I just that would be, I would appear that would be unusual. So, transparency, get it fixed, so that it doesn't happen again. We can't. This is what happens when you misclassify inmates.
Right.
People get hurt. Escapes happen. That's why classification is a very, very critical, vital function of corrections. And when you make mistakes in classification, these are some of the things that happen.
And I like what we did here, guys. If you guys noticed something, even though we noticed some concerns on the floor, we elevated the dialogue to where the main concern was. The inmate shouldn't even been in the gym. We did note some of the concerns just to kind of give people the immediate, hey, here's some knowledge you may want to have if you ever work in a rec area. But we wanted to stay true to where the dialogue was, which is basically at the end of the day, the higher level is, should he have been in that facility? So I'm not saying all the other things don't matter, but if he wasn't in the facility, we would have may not have had this incident. But it's still good to have this information, because at the end of the day, he's one inmate of many that could always see that opportunity. So he just happened to act out, and this happens to be the things that we're using to justify the reasoning for him acting out. Well, he acted out because he's a maximum level security, shouldn't be there, and that gives us knowledge. But trust me, there's inmates there that are medium that fit there that would take an opportunity. So don't just think we're just holding it because this inmate's a maximum level inmate. Just opportunities exist when they have less restriction. So, hey, what's your thoughts on all this, Joe? Lot we talked about.
Yeah, I've always kind of been a big advocate of having outside sources when it comes to serious incident reviews. Not so much your own people, but, fresh set eyes that kind of look at things unbiasedly. But, I'm kind of with Butch, man. I'm stuck in that. Why the hell was he even there to begin with, given his record? That's just one thing I can't. Again, too, like you said, we don't have a points-based system here in Texas, so it's basically up to the classification team at each unit to justify a classification, and we send it to the main office where they have the Bureau of Classification. They either approve or disapprove. But nevertheless, it's a horrible incident. The officer Timid, I keep saying Timid, to his family and his wife, I pray for a speedy 100% recovery, and know that we're all in support of you and for you. And I pray for a 100% recovery outcome for him. We just need to revisit policies and procedures and make things better. I think, a lot of things differ from state to state, and I think that's where one problem is. Your medium custody may not be my medium custody. Your maximum custody may be my medium custody. I think there's a lot of things that get lost in translation between states. I think it needs to be more universalized, as far as that goes. Definitely got to have an open line of communication. But my heart and prayers are out, for the officer and his family. And I pray that he makes a 100% recovery. And also to Jim Hall, brother, know that as long as you're fighting, we're right here fighting for you and with you. And know that you guys are in my prayers too. And I will see y'all next week. I'll be coming to visit with you.
And guys, remember, I have the link to both their GoFundMe pages, Matt Tidman and Jim Hall. The links are in the description. So if you get a chance, that's a great way to help out a brother. And guys, these are legit GoFundMe pages. One was put together with Joe Pomponio right here and shared by Russ and in our groups. And then Tim, actually you could tell that's definitely legit, put on the news and everything, put together by Brandy, I think it was, but it's definitely legit and it's done very well, raised over $100,000. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of those times where something comes up and remind us all of a sudden that what we do is a deadly serious occupation. And, sometimes things get going well. We're able to minimize some serious situations. And at one level or another, whether it's on the tactical end, whether it's on the strategic end with administrators and so forth, sometimes those cracks of complacency open up and you just haven't been paying attention to how deadly the profession is. We need to really live in that mindset. We can't always stay there where it's, deadly, serious, emergent all the time, right? Because we would burn out really quick if we were, in that orange phase or red phase, as we talk about, the mental color code. But we can live in that yellow part of it. We can be in that thing where we remind ourselves every minute of every day, hey, am I taking this seriously enough? Is there something that I'm overlooking? Have I become complacent? Is someone that's working next to me, have they become complacent? Check yourself and dial things back in. If you find that you're loosening up a little bit too much, whether you're an administrator who's doing a classification on an inmate, or whether you're an officer that's, watching over a gym full of guys playing basketball, you can up your game. That's my 2 cents worth, other than to say my heart goes out to this officer. I hope he makes a full recovery. I hope that, the situation that he's in now resolves itself and, he lives happily ever after. And, prayers and everything else going out to Jim. I hope that he gets his miracle and that he has a chance to live a much longer life and to, be that, absolute professional there for me on Keepers of Chaos.
Yeah. And guys, I want to mention something too. My closing is that complacency, again, we had a discussion here that's meant to just put out dialogue that's meant to happen because the discussion's happening and it's not about taking sides. It's about, hey, let's come up from so many different perspectives. And again, let's see where we all, either sit in agreement or not. It's funny because complacency comes in many forms. Maybe in custody, it's hands in their pockets, maybe not doing all their tours, where in management, it's blindly signing papers because they're in a rush and they get millions of papers every day. So what happens is they don't even look at the paper. They just trust the person that's giving them the paper, but that person could make a mistake. Like it's true. When you're in management, you may not look at everything. It's like, oh, this person's giving me the paperwork. I'll just sign it because I know they're good. I know they're good, but they could make a mistake or they could become complacent, So, it's just when you're in higher level management, you're responsible for bigger areas and complacency at the highest level can affect so many people at the lowest level, but we are human and we all, fall into complacency or maybe, getting that email 1 minute right before you're going to leave. And it's like, really, man? And then you're not even focused on the email. You're focused on, well, let me just get this done so I don't have to worry about it tomorrow. And, let's just end this day on a clean slate. I mean, again, it's not an excuse, but it's something that we should know occurs and then step up and admit it. I mean, that's the key, because we all gone through it. And for people to say, well, that's foolish, that would never happen to me. It does. It happens to us all, just in different ways. I mean, we've done episodes about complacency from the front line. Maybe one day we could do an episode about complacency at the highest level of management. Some of the things that we may be doing that we don't realize we do. And one of them is just blindly signing off papers. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but everyone here knows exactly what I'm talking about. And again, there's a consequence behind that. So again, this was an objective dialogue. The key here is to get the information out, but more importantly, we have a hero. And at the end of the day, this video is also to show recognition to that hero. Get that GoFundMe page up, put some announcement out there so people know it exists. But let also the public, if they're watching, because there's some people from the outside looking in, these are the sacrifices our heroes make.
every day.
You know, every day. So let's just, sad situation, but let's thank this hero, because at the end of the day, he's doing a job most people wouldn't even dare to do, and they don't get appreciated enough. And for Jim, man, love you, brother. We got the again, the GoFundMe page up for Jim. We're thinking about you. Looking forward to the FaceTime with Joe. We'll make that happen. And again, I really do hope you stay strong, because we're stronger with you. So, we need you too. So, it just kind of news affects us all on this one. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.